Hi, welcome to part 7 in our exploration of Asian art. In our last segment, we looked at some images of the Buddha, and we were in China at the Longman Caves, and we are going to travel back to India just to kind of do a comparison because there's also some cave sculptures in Ajanta, India. So this is an image you can see here. So it's hidden away in the hills of northwest India, some 200 miles from the busy streets of Mumbai. It emerged as a magnificent jewel of art and religion. The caves cut into the face of a mountain and they form a horseshoe shape around the Wangara River. They are examples of one of India's unique artistic traditions known as rock-cut temples. Ajanta consists of 30 caves, each dedicated to the life of Buddha. Each cave is filled with sculpture, wall murals, and ceiling paintings. Um, Though much of the site has collapsed, what remains at Ajanta has allowed a glimpse into the artistic traditions of ancient India. Um, the caves at Ajanta date from the 2nd century BCE to 650 CE and were cut into the mountainside in two distinct phases. Discovered by chance in 1819 by British soldiers on a hunt, the Ajanta caves have become an icon of ancient Indian art and have influenced subsequent artists and styles. The caves at the site are not numbered chronologically. Instead, their numbering is based on location, beginning with Cave 1 on the north side of the horseshoe. All of the caves at Ajanta fall into the category of Vihara, which were monasteries with residence halls, or Chai, Chitya um, Grihas, which translates to sanctuaries, stupa monument halls. Each cave has its own unique characteristics, making it difficult to write about the Ajanta caves as a whole. So here is the inside of one of these caves. This is known as Cave 26, and you can see it's very elaborate. And so this is all carved into live rock. So the Ajanta caves are engulfed in darkness. In fact, the lack of light is crucial in the experience at Ajanta, demanding the viewer's time while intensifying a sense of mysteriousness. And that's something we'll explore, the use of lighting, especially in sacred spaces. Often darkness, kind of adds to that element. With Christian churches, which we will get to much later in the year, we see the use of light as well, but more opposite, especially with Gothic churches. We see light as, light-filled spaces as very symbolic of the divine light of God and Jesus. There may have been dim artificial lighting. Here, I'll go back to the inside of this. Created by oil lamps in the past. However, even today, the majority of the caves remain completely dark and without the help of artificial lighting. The caves remain in their original state. Cave 1 is a magnificently painted vihara, or monastery, filled with wall murals, sculptures, and ceiling paintings that date back to the 5th century. Originally, Cave 1 also had a porch which led to the main hall. However, it has since collapsed. The main hall of Cave 1 is square in plan with aisles along all four sides. So there's the floor plan. Adjacent to these aisles are doorways leading to 14 small chambers. Cave 1 contains 20 painted and carved pillars. Above the pillars are reliefs depicting tales from the life of Buddha, known as the Jataka tales. Located at the rear of the hall is a large shrine of the Buddha. The walls were originally covered in paintings, but today there are only 9 surviving images. The most famous being the Bodhisattva Padmapana, and what that means in Sanskrit is it literally translates into one who holds the lotus. So here is this detail, and you've probably seen it. It really is quite beautiful. Um, this painting can be found to the left of the main shrine. It depicts one of the most beloved bodhisattvas, and I believe the name is Avalokitesvara. It's spelled Avalokitesvara. The term bodhisattva refers to a person that has been awakened by the Buddhist spirit. According to the Mahayana doctrine, um, Avalokitesvara postponed his ascension into Buddhahood until he assisted every being in achieving nirvana. So they're sort of like mini Buddhas in a way, like where they have chosen to stay and instead of achieving nirvana to help others. Avalokitesvara takes the largest number of forms across Asia. Originally a masculine form, he is also known as the feminine um, Guanyin in China and Kuan Yin in Japan. In this painting, his tan body darkened only by the locks of in his in this painting, his tan body darkened only by the locks of curly hair is delicate and elegant. He is adorned with pearls, amethysts, and other attributes of traditional Indian jewelry. On his head sits a magnificent crown, which at some point was most likely colored in extreme detail, but over time has faded. His eyes are lowered in a meditative state. His calm spiritual face sets the tone and mood of the room. In his right hand he holds a lotus blossom, which may represent his spiritual awakening. You look up from the beautiful wall paintings, you can also see geometric design motifs that adorn the ceiling. They're quite elaborate. There are also images of peacocks subtly decorated in blue paint made from lapis lazuli, which is a stone. One of the panels shows a decorative vegetable motif that looks similar to our modern day green bell peppers. In addition to this, there's a creature with a bull's head, whose body transforms into swirling, curvaceous lines that blend into floral decorations on the next panel. I mean, it almost looks like blue porcelain when I look at it. So it's very detailed. The ceiling paintings are so beautiful that one of the panels, which depicts a running elephant surrounded by flowers, was chosen as the official logo of India's Department of Tourism. The elephant is shown playfully galloping as his trunk swirls close to his body. The painting technique at Ajanta are similar to European fresco techniques, which we will study later. The primary difference is that and so fresco techniques are basically a layer of wet plaster, and then they would paint the pigment on and it would absorb into the plaster. So the primary difference is that the layer of plaster was dry when painted, and that's known as fresco a secco. Um, uh, First, a rough plaster of clay, cow dung, and rice husks were pressed onto the rough cave walls. This was coated with lime juice in order to create a smooth working surface. The dark outlines of the figures were then added, followed by a palette of only 6 colors. The pigments the artist used came from natural resources: red and yellow ochre, crushed green malachite, blue lapis lazuli, etc. And so the problem with dry plaster is that it does flake off. But however, the reason why they probably use the dry plaster technique was because lapis lazuli, the blue didn't show as vibrant when it was wet. So often, and you see this with Christian churches as well, or or Christian fresco paintings, you'll see that a lot of the blue has chipped away or faded because it was done with dry plaster instead of wet plaster. And then this is a really beautiful image I thought I'd show you guys. It's the reclining Buddha. So they also have amazing relief sculptures and sculpture in the round. And so this is kind of a beloved image of the Buddha, and this is located in Cave 26. All right, so we're going to move on, and we're going to go to Japan now and look at the Great Buddha Hall, Todaji, in Nara, Japan. So this was completed in the 740s. Todaji, or the Great Eastern Temple, was the largest building project ever on Japanese soil. Its creation reflects the complex intermingling of Buddhism and the politics in early Japan. When it was built in the 12th century, it ushered in a new era of shoguns and helped to found Japan's most celebrated school of sculpture. It was built to impress twice, so it actually was restored and renovated at one point. The term shogun is an ancient military term that was adopted in the 12th century for the dominant warlord who held political and martial power in Japan, while the emperor in Kyoto maintained his position as figurehead of the state and cultural leader. The members of the Minamoto, Ashinga, and the Tokugawa families, who held the positions of shogun successively from the 12th to 19th century, varied greatly in the extent and security of their authority and the stability and prosperity of the realm under their command. The roots of Todaja are found in the arrival of Buddhism in Japan in the 6th century. Buddhism made its way from India along the Silk Route through Central Asia, China, and Korea. Mahayana Buddhism was officially introduced to the Japanese imperial court around 552 by an emissary from a Korean king who offered the Japanese emperor Kemei a gilded bronze statue of the Buddha. A copy of the Buddhist sutras, or sacred writings and letters, stating this doctrine can create religious merit and retribution without measure and bounds, and so leads on to a full appreciation of the highest wisdom. So again, just to kind of refresh about the two major schools of Buddhist thought, they are Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. According to Theravada Buddhists, each person is responsible for their own enlightenment. Mahayana Buddhism was a school that arose around 100 CE. Mahayana literally means the big vehicle. It is a big vehicle that transports more sentient beings across the ocean of existence from the wheel of samsara, reincarnation, to enlightenment and nirvana. The cornerstone of Mahayana Buddhism is the belief in the bodhisattvas, the altruistic enlightened beings who delayed their own final nirvana until every sentient being reaches enlightenment. I know, it's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of. Also, the Silk Road is a metaphor for a long distance trade, and this is an important vocab term, across Asia that first developed from around 300 BC to roughly 200 AD. It was not, in fact, a road, but rather a collection of land and sea routes linking cities, trading posts, caravan watering places, and hostels between the Eastern Mediterranean and China. I'm going to go back to this image of the Buddha. So Buddhism quickly became associated with the imperial court, Japanese court, whose members became the patrons of early Buddhist art and architecture. This connection between the sacred and secular power would define Japan's ruling elite for centuries to come. These early Buddhist projects also revealed the receptivity of Japan to foreign ideas and goods, as Buddhist monks and craftspeople came to Japan. Buddhism influence in Buddhism's influence grew in the Nara era. This was from 710 to 794, during the reign of Emperor Shomu and his consort Empress Komayo, who fused Buddhist doctrine and political policy, promoting Buddhism as the protector of the state. In 741, reportedly following the empress's wishes, Shomu ordered temples, monasteries, and convents to be built throughout Japan's 66 provinces. This national system of monasteries, known as the Kokubuji or Bunji, would be under the jurisdiction of the new imperial Todaja, the Great Eastern Temple, to be built in the capital of Nara. This is what you're looking at now. So why build such a temple on this sort of unprecedented scale? Emperor Jomu's motives seem to have been mixed on the spiritual and the pragmatic. In his bid to unite various Japanese clans under his centralized rule, Shomu also promoted spiritual unity. Todaji would be the chief temple of the Kokubinji system and be the center of national ritual. Its construction brought together the best craftspeople in Japan with the latest building technology. It was architecture to impress, display power, prestige, and piety of the imperial house of Japan. However, the project was not without its critics. Every person in Japan was required to contribute through a special tax to its construction, and the court chronicle the Shoku Nihonji notes that the people are made to suffer by the construction of the Todaji, and the clans worry over their suffering. That was a notation. You know, basically they were being taxed. Todaji included the unusual components of a Buddhist complex, as its symbolic heart was the massive Hondo, the main hall. This is spelled Hondo, also called the Daibu Sudan, Daibutsuden, the Great Buddha Hall, which was completed in 752. It measures 50 meters by 86 meters and was supported by 84 massive cypress pillars. It held a huge bronze Buddha figure created between 743 to 752. Subsequently, two 9-story pagodas, a lecture hall, quarters for monks were added to the complex. The statue was inspired by similar statues of the Buddha in China and was commissioned by Emperor Zhou in 743. This colossal Buddha required all the available copper in Japan, and workers used an estimate 163,000 cubic feet of charcoal to produce the metal alloy and form the bronze figure. It was completed in 749. Though the snail curl hair, this is supposed to be a sign of Buddha's divinity, took an additional 2 years to complete. Look at that. That's incredible. So this is a detail of what used to be is a replacement for one of the sculptures. So when completed, the entire Japanese court, government officials, and Buddhist dignitaries from China and India attended the Buddha's eye-opening ceremony overseen by the Empress Kokin and attended by the retired Emperor Jomu and Empress Komayo, Komayao, an Indian monk named Bodhisena is recorded as a painting uh, in the Buddha's eye, symbolically imbuing it with life. The Emperor Jommu himself is said to have sat in front of the great Buddha, go back to that image, and vowed himself to be the servant of the three treasures of Buddhism: the Buddha, Buddhist laws, and Buddhist monastic community. No image of the ceremony survived, but a Nara period scroll painting depicts a humble, small figure um, at the Buddha's base, suggesting its awe-inspiring presence. Um, so the great Buddha sits upon a bronze lotus pedestal that is engraved with images of the Shaka, the historical Buddha known as Shakyamuni. Buddha and varied bodhisattvas or sacred beings also are depicted. The petal surface are etched in fleshy figures with swelling chests, full faces, and swirling drapery in a style typical of elegant naturalism of the Nara era imagery. The petals are the only remainders of the original statue, which was destroyed by fire in the 12th century. Today's statue, about that, replacement, but remains a revered figure with an annual ritual cleaning ceremony, which I will show you a video of. I know this is a little confusing since a lot of this is replacement. So I guess this is the great Buddha, the lotus petal detail that we're looking at. All right, so we're going to look at the great south gate of the Todaji. The Jinpi Civil War, which took place between 1180 and 85, saw countless temples destroyed as Buddhist clergy took sides in clan warfare. Japan's principal temple, Todaji, sided with the eventually victorious Minamoto clan that was burned by the soon-to-be defeated Tara clan in 1180. The destruction of this revered temple shocked Japan. At the war's end, the reconstruction of Todaji was one of the first projects undertaken by Minamoto Yoritomoto, who, as the new ruling shogun, was eager to present Minamoto as national saviors. The aristocracy and the warrior elite contributed funds, and the Buddhist priest Shunjabo Jojin was placed in charge of reconstruction. Todaji again became the largest building project in Japan. Tojin was unique in his generation in that he made 3 trips to China between 1167 and 1176. His experience of the Song dynasty Buddhist architecture inspired the rebuilding of the temples of Nara in what became known as the Great Buddha, or the Indian style. The key surviving example of this style is the Todaji's Great South Gate, which we see here, which is called Anan Daman, which I'm probably mispronouncing, which dates to 1199. An elaborately bracketed system supports the broad eaved 2-tiered roof. The gate holds the 2 massive wooden sculptures of guardian kings, Kongo Rikishi, by the masters of the Ki school of sculpture. Here they are. They're pretty extraordinary. So the Ki school of sculpture, the largest scale rebuilding of the Genovese after the Genovese Civil War, created a multitude of missions for builders, carpenters, and sculptors. This concentration of talent led to the emergence of the Ki school of sculpture, considered by many to be the peak of Japanese sculpture. Noted for its austere realism and the dynamic muscularity of its figures, the Key school reflects the Buddhism and warrior-centered culture of the Kamukara era from 1185 to 1333. Unki is considered the leading figure of the Key school, with a career spanning over 30 years. His distinct style emerged in his work on the refurbishment of the many Nara temple shrines, most particularly Todaji. Unki's fierce guardian figure, Ungayo, in the Nandamon is typical of Unki's powerful dynamic bodies. It stands in dramatic contrapposto opposite the other muscular guardian king Agyo, created with Kaiki and other key sculptures. And again, contrapposto is a vocab term, and it's this idea of this sort of tension of weight and relaxation of the figure. So it's more of sort of the way we stand naturally. We'll talk a lot about contrapposto when we get into Greek classical art. We talked a little bit about it with Indian art, in particular with the image of Shiva as Lord of the Dance. So anyway, you can see this kind of this idea of contrapposto, where you have a weight-bearing leg, a relaxed leg. And again, this is normally how we stand. You know, we usually kind of shift weight back and forth, so it kind of adds to this idea of realism. The Grand Buddhist architectural and sculptural projects of early Japan share common materials, wood, and are thus closely linked to the natural environment and to the long history of wood craftsmanship in Japan. When Korea's craftsmen brought Buddhist temple architecture to Japan in the 6th century, Japanese carpenters were already using complex wood joints instead of nails to hold buildings together. And there is a good example of this technique in your book, so please be sure to read it. The Koreans' technology allowed for the support of larger tile-roofed structures that used brackets and sturdy foundation pillars to funnel weight to the ground. This technology ushered in new, larger scale in Japanese architecture. Monumental timber framed architectures required enormous amounts of wood. The wood of choice was cypress, which grows up into 40 meters tall and has a straight, tight grain that easily splits into long beams and is resistant to rot. The 8th century campaign to construct Buddhist temples in every Japanese province under imperial control, mostly in the Kina area today, home to Osaka and Kyoto, is estimated to have resulted in the construction of 600 to 850 temples using 3 million cubic meters of wood. As the years progressed, Kina's old growth forests were exhausted and builders had to travel farther away for wood. By far the most prestigious and wood-demanding project was the Imperial Monastery of Todaji. The 8th century Todaji had 2 9-story pagodas and a 50 by 80 great hall supported by 84 massive cypress pillars that used at least 2,200 acres of local forest. After Todaji's destruction in 1180, it was rebuilt under the supervision of the monk Chojin, who solicited aid from all over Western Japan. Builders had to travel hundreds of kilometers from Kina to find suitable wood. Whole forests were cleared to find tall cypresses for pillars, which were then transported at a great cost. 118 dams were built to raise river levels in order to transport the massive pillars. And that was only the pillars. Wood for the rest of the structure came from at least 10 provinces. Todaji's reconstructed main hall was only half the size of the original and its pagodas several stories shorter. The availability and scarcity of quality local wood was a major factor in the design and evolution of architecture in Japan. For example, the growing scarcity of cypress of structural dimension led to innovations that allowed carpenters to work with less straight grained woods like red pine and zelkova, which I guess is a type of wood. Um, so that's it for this segment. We're going um, to go to another geographical location in Indonesia in our next segment and look at Bobador, which is a beautiful Buddhist complex. So stay tuned for that.